A narcissist fears healthy boundaries because boundaries represent something they cannot easily control. At first, this idea may seem surprising. Many people assume that narcissists fear confrontation, rejection, exposure, or criticism more than anything else. While those things can certainly make them uncomfortable, healthy boundaries strike at something even deeper. Boundaries challenge the very system that allows manipulation, control, and emotional domination to thrive. They create a line that says, "This is where I end, and this is where your influence over me stops." For someone who has become accustomed to pushing past the limits of others, that line can feel threatening. Healthy boundaries are not walls built out of anger. They are not punishments. They are not acts of revenge. They are clear expressions of self-respect. A healthy boundary communicates what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not. It defines the standards a person has for how they will be treated. Most emotionally healthy individuals understand and respect these standards because they recognize that every person deserves dignity, autonomy, and consideration. A narcissist, however, often views boundaries differently. Instead of seeing them as reasonable and necessary, they may interpret them as obstacles standing in the way of getting what they want. This is why many empaths struggle when they first begin setting boundaries with narcissistic people. Empaths are often compassionate, understanding, and willing to give others the benefit of the doubt. They naturally seek harmony and connection. Because of this, they may overlook behaviors that violate their personal limits. They may excuse disrespect because they understand someone's difficult past. They may tolerate manipulation because they want to avoid conflict. They may continue giving chances because they believe everyone deserves understanding. Over time, this can create a dynamic where the narcissist becomes accustomed to receiving unlimited access, unlimited forgiveness, and unlimited opportunities without accountability. The moment boundaries appear, the dynamic changes. Suddenly there are consequences. Suddenly there are limits. Suddenly there is resistance where there once was compliance. The narcissist may react strongly because the familiar pattern has been interrupted. They may become defensive, angry, dismissive, or even appear deeply hurt. They might accuse the other person of being selfish, uncaring, or unfair. They may attempt to make the boundary setter feel guilty for simply protecting their own emotional well-being. These reactions are often designed to pressure the person into abandoning the boundary and returning to old patterns. One reason healthy boundaries create such discomfort is that they remove access to control. Control often depends on predictability. A narcissist may rely on knowing exactly how someone will respond to criticism, guilt, silent treatment, or emotional pressure. When boundaries are introduced, those tactics begin losing their effectiveness. The empath who once immediately apologized now pauses and evaluates the situation. The person who once accepted blame for everything now questions whether the blame is justified. The individual who once sacrificed their own needs now starts honoring them. This shift can feel deeply unsettling to someone who expects compliance. Healthy boundaries also force accountability. Accountability requires a person to acknowledge the impact of their actions and take responsibility for them. Narcissistic individuals often struggle with this because accountability threatens the image they have created of themselves. They may go to great lengths to avoid feeling wrong, flawed, or responsible. Boundaries make avoidance more difficult. When someone calmly says, "I will not continue this conversation if you speak to me disrespectfully," the focus shifts from excuses to behavior. When someone says, "I am not comfortable with that," and my answer is no, manipulation loses room to operate. Boundaries bring clarity where confusion once existed. Many people mistakenly believe that boundaries must be aggressive to be effective. In reality, the strongest boundaries are often the calmest. They do not require shouting, arguing, or proving a point. They simply require consistency. A boundary is not about controlling another person's behavior. It is about deciding what you will do when a certain behavior occurs. This distinction is important because it places power back into your own hands. You are no longer waiting for someone else to change before you can have peace. You are deciding what is acceptable in your life and acting accordingly. For empaths, learning this lesson can be transformative. Many have spent years believing that love means endless patience, endless sacrifice, and endless understanding. While these qualities can be beautiful, they become dangerous when they exist without limits. Compassion without boundaries can become self-neglect. Forgiveness without wisdom can become permission for repeated harm. Kindness without self-respect can become an invitation for exploitation. Healthy boundaries allow empathy to function as it was intended. They protect the giver while preserving the gift itself. A narcissist fears healthy boundaries because boundaries reveal a truth they would rather avoid. They are not entitled to unlimited access to another person's time, energy, emotions, or life. Boundaries communicate that relationships are voluntary, not ownership. They remind everyone involved that respect is not optional and that love does not require surrendering personal dignity. For someone who benefits from blurred lines, clear lines can feel threatening. The empowering reality is that every boundary you set strengthens your relationship with yourself. Every time you honor your limits, you send a message to your own mind that your needs matter. Every time you refuse to accept disrespect, you reinforce your sense of worth. Every time you choose self-respect over approval, you become less vulnerable to manipulation. Boundaries do not make you less caring. They make your care healthier. They do not make you harder to love. They make your relationships more authentic. They do not push the right people away. They reveal who is willing to respect you and who only valued the absence of limits. Empathy is often misunderstood in today's world. Many people see empathy as softness, endless patience, constant forgiveness, or the willingness to absorb the emotions of others, no matter the personal cost. Because of this misunderstanding, empathetic individuals are frequently labeled as weak, overly sensitive, or incapable of standing up for themselves. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. True empathy is not weakness. In its healthiest form, empathy is one of the greatest strengths a human being can possess because it combines emotional awareness with wisdom, compassion with discernment, and kindness with self-respect. At its core, empathy is the ability to understand and connect with the feelings, experiences, and perspectives of another person. It allows someone to look beyond surface behaviors and recognize the emotions that may be driving them. An empathetic person can often sense pain that others overlook. They can recognize fear behind anger, insecurity behind arrogance, and sadness behind hostility. This ability creates deeper human connections and allows relationships to be built on understanding rather than judgment. The problem arises when empathy is confused with obligation. Many people believe that understanding someone's pain means they must tolerate harmful behavior. They assume that because they can see the reasons behind another person's actions, they are responsible for enduring the consequences of those actions. This is where empathy becomes distorted. Understanding why someone behaves poorly does not require accepting mistreatment. Recognizing another person's wounds does not mean offering them unlimited access to wound you in return. Narcissistic individuals often benefit from this confusion. They may exploit the natural compassion of empathetic people by encouraging them to focus endlessly on explanations rather than accountability. The empath becomes so focused on understanding the narcissist's struggles that they stop paying attention to their own suffering. They tell themselves that the criticism comes from insecurity, the manipulation comes from fear, the dishonesty comes from childhood wounds, and the disrespect comes from unresolved pain. While these explanations may contain elements of truth, they do not erase responsibility. Understanding behavior and excusing behavior are not the same thing. True empathy recognizes this distinction. It allows a person to acknowledge someone's struggles without becoming trapped by them. It understands that every individual is responsible for how they treat others, regardless of their past experiences. A person can have compassion for someone's pain while still refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics. This balance requires strength because it demands emotional maturity. It is often easier to surrender boundaries than to maintain them. It is often easier to keep the peace than to risk conflict. It is often easier to sacrifice personal needs than to face the discomfort of disappointing someone. Real empathy chooses wisdom over convenience. One of the strongest qualities of empathy is the ability to remain compassionate without losing objectivity. When people are emotionally manipulated, they are often pushed toward extremes. They are encouraged to see situations through guilt, fear, or obligation rather than truth. An empathetic person with wisdom learns to step back and evaluate reality clearly. They can care about someone while recognizing unhealthy patterns. They can love someone while acknowledging harmful behavior. They can offer support without becoming responsible for another person's choices. This is where self-respect becomes an essential part of empathy. Without self-respect, empathy can become self-destructive. A person who values others but neglects themselves eventually becomes emotionally exhausted. Their generosity turns into resentment. Their patience turns into frustration. Their compassion turns into burnout. Healthy empathy includes the understanding that your feelings, needs, and well-being are just as important as anyone else's. It recognizes that caring for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Many empaths spend years believing that strength looks like endurance. They think strength means tolerating more pain, giving more chances, and sacrificing more of themselves. They pride themselves on their ability to withstand difficult situations and difficult people. While resilience is valuable, endurance alone is not strength. Strength is knowing when to continue and when to walk away. Strength is recognizing when your kindness is being appreciated and when it is being exploited. Strength is understanding that boundaries are not signs of weakness, but evidence of self-worth. Empathy also requires courage. It takes courage to remain kind in a world that often rewards selfishness. It takes courage to stay compassionate after experiencing disappointment. It takes courage to believe in the goodness of people while maintaining realistic expectations. Many individuals become hardened after being hurt repeatedly. They build emotional walls and disconnect from vulnerability. While this may provide temporary protection, it often comes at the cost of meaningful connection. Healthy empathy chooses a different path. It remains open-hearted while becoming wiser about who receives access to that heart. Wisdom transforms empathy from a vulnerability into a superpower. Wisdom teaches an empath to observe actions rather than simply listen to words. It teaches them to recognize patterns instead of focusing only on promises. It teaches them to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. Most importantly, wisdom teaches them that love and respect must exist together. Compassion without wisdom invites manipulation. Wisdom without compassion can become coldness. Together, they create emotional strength. A truly empathetic person does not lose themselves in the emotions of others. They remain grounded in their own values and identity. They understand where their responsibility begins and where it ends. They know they can support someone without rescuing them. They know they can listen without absorbing every burden. They know they can care deeply while still saying no when necessary. This version of empathy is powerful because it cannot be easily manipulated. It is not driven by guilt. It is not controlled by fear of rejection. It is not dependent on external validation. Instead, it operates from a place of confidence and clarity. It recognizes that genuine compassion includes honesty, accountability, and respect. It understands that healthy relationships require mutual care rather than one-sided sacrifice. When empathy is combined with wisdom and self-respect, it becomes one of the most resilient forces a person can possess. It allows someone to remain compassionate without becoming naive, loving without becoming dependent, and understanding without becoming vulnerable to exploitation. Rather than making a person weaker, this form of empathy creates emotional stability, stronger relationships, clearer boundaries, and a deeper connection to truth. It transforms kindness from something that can be taken advantage of into something that is protected, intentional, and deeply rooted in personal strength. One of the most powerful lessons an empath can learn when dealing with a narcissist is the difference between challenging the behavior and attacking the person. This distinction may seem small at first, but it changes everything. Many people enter difficult relationships believing that if they can just make the other person understand what they are doing wrong, the problems will disappear. They spend countless hours explaining their feelings, defending their perspectives, and pointing out unhealthy patterns. Yet the more they try to convince the narcissist, the more frustrated and exhausted they become. The reason is simple. Narcissists often interpret criticism of their behavior as criticism of their identity. Instead of hearing, "That action was hurtful," they hear, "You are a bad person." Instead of focusing on the issue being discussed, they shift their attention toward protecting their self-image. The conversation quickly moves away from accountability and turns into an argument about intentions, blame, or character. Before long, the original issue is forgotten, and the empath finds themselves defending their right to even have feelings. This is why challenging the behavior rather than the person is so important. It keeps the focus on specific actions, specific choices, and specific consequences. It avoids becoming trapped in endless debates about personality, motives, or personal worth. When you challenge behavior, you are addressing what happened rather than who someone is. You are staying grounded in facts rather than emotional accusations. For many empaths, this approach requires a significant shift in mindset. Empathetic people often believe that if they can help someone see the impact of their actions, that person will naturally want to change. Unfortunately, narcissistic individuals frequently respond differently. They may deny the behavior, minimize its significance, blame someone else, or create distractions designed to avoid accountability. If the empath becomes emotionally reactive during these moments, the narcissist gains an opportunity to redirect the conversation away from the actual issue. Imagine a situation where a narcissist repeatedly dismisses your feelings. An emotional reaction might sound like, "You never care about me. You're selfish and impossible to talk to." While the pain behind those words may be genuine, they give the narcissist an opening. Instead of addressing the dismissive behavior, they can focus on defending themselves against the labels. They might argue that they are not selfish, list examples of times they were helpful, or accuse you of exaggerating. The discussion becomes a battle over identity rather than a conversation about behavior. A more effective response focuses directly on the action itself. You might calmly say, "When I share my feelings and they are dismissed, I feel unheard. I need conversations where both perspectives are respected." Notice the difference. The focus remains on what happened rather than on attacking character. This approach does not guarantee that the narcissist will respond positively, but it prevents the discussion from being unnecessarily derailed. One reason this method is so powerful is that it protects your emotional energy. Narcissistic individuals often thrive on emotional reactions because strong emotions can cloud judgment and create confusion. When an empath becomes angry, frustrated, or desperate to be understood, they may say things they later regret. They may become trapped in circular arguments that never reach a resolution. By focusing on behavior instead of personal attacks, they remain centered and clear. This clarity is one of the greatest strengths a super empath develops. Instead of reacting impulsively, they learn to observe patterns. They stop asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and begin asking, "What behavior am I seeing, and how should I respond to it?" This shift moves attention away from emotional chaos and toward practical decision-making. It creates space for wisdom to replace frustration. Challenging behavior also removes the need to diagnose, analyze, or label the other person. Many empaths become consumed with understanding why someone behaves the way they do. They spend endless hours researching personality traits, emotional wounds, and psychological patterns. While knowledge can be valuable, it does not always create change. You do not need complete insight into someone's motivations to recognize unhealthy behavior. You do not need to understand every detail of their psychology to decide what you will tolerate. This realization is liberating because it places the focus back where it belongs, on your choices. Instead of trying to change another person, you begin evaluating your own responses. Instead of trying to force awareness, you establish boundaries. Instead of engaging in power struggles, you maintain standards. This shift represents a major step in personal growth because it moves you away from control and toward responsibility. Another benefit of challenging behavior rather than the person is that it reveals character over time. Healthy individuals may not enjoy hearing feedback, but they are generally capable of reflection and adjustment. They may become defensive initially, yet they eventually consider the impact of their actions. Narcissistic individuals often respond differently. They may consistently reject accountability, reverse blame, or repeat the same harmful behaviors despite repeated conversations. When you focus on behavior, these patterns become easier to recognize. Patterns matter because actions reveal far more than promises. A narcissist may offer apologies, explanations, and reassurances. They may say exactly what you want to hear. However, if the behavior remains unchanged, the reality of the relationship remains unchanged as well. By paying attention to actions rather than words, you gain a clearer understanding of what is actually happening. Remaining calm while challenging behavior is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence of emotional strength. Anyone can react in the heat of the moment. It takes discipline to stay composed when confronted with manipulation, blame, or disrespect. It takes confidence to communicate boundaries without becoming defensive. It takes wisdom to recognize that not every battle deserves your energy. As empaths grow stronger, they begin to understand that their goal is not to win arguments. Their goal is to protect their peace, honor their values, and maintain their self-respect. They stop seeking validation from people who are unwilling to provide it. They stop wasting energy trying to convince others of obvious truths. They stop making their well-being dependent upon someone else's understanding. When you challenge the behavior rather than the person, you remove yourself from emotional warfare and place yourself in a position of strength. You become less reactive, more observant, and far more difficult to manipulate. You learn that truth does not need to be shouted to be powerful. It only needs to be spoken clearly, consistently, and without surrendering your dignity.